So welcome to the conversation on case studies. The idea here is to set up a few basic things and then move into a conversation around some different scenarios. So the first off, I'll give you the agenda. I'm going to give you the paradox of coaching. Then a quick review of coaching ethics. We'll explore how ethics and competencies work together, discuss case studies. So that's where we get into the fun conversation. Give you a couple of scenarios. We'll also talk about gray space in ethics. We'll talk about steps and resources for doing the right thing. And then, of course, whatever debrief we want to do and questions. So first off, the paradox of coaching. And to me, this is kind of fun. Coaching skills can be used when you're mentoring. They can be used when you're managing, counseling, therapy, consulting, leading, wherever you're at. Coaching skills are a skill set that are just flat out good people and communication skills. Alternatively, the paradox, mentoring, managing, counseling, therapy, consulting, all of these other pieces, leading, those are inappropriate when we're coaching. So that the flip on that. And in terms of the code of ethics, there's an introduction at the beginning of it. It has some key definitions. Then it goes into saying core values are incorporated in part of it. The standards themselves talk about our responsibility to clients, our responsibility to the practice and performance, responsibility to professionalism, responsibility to society, and then there's a pledge. So as coaches, we pledge to honor and be accountable to that code of ethics. Similarly, there are competencies that speak to ethics. Very specifically, competency 1 demonstrates ethical practice, embodies a coaching mindset, combines, if you will, that paradox we were talking about and the pieces from ethics, because it's holding the client as their own best expert. And then establishes and maintains agreements, speaks to the ethics as well. And let's see, Elizabeth, we see you've joined us. We're hoping you're okay coming on camera and having the conversation with us. That's our goal for today. We're going to be discussing case studies. What does all of that mean for us as coaches? So first off, being ethical requires the application of the competencies, and applications of the competencies requires being ethical. They literally go hand in hand together. Now I'm going to move us into a couple of scenarios, and I'm going to invite the conversation. So let's say you're coaching a client and you have some materials you want to share with them. When is that not okay to do? If you are going to do it, how can it be done ethically? And if you want to refer to your code of ethics, one thing that will speak to this is number 26. So I'm opening up the floor to the conversation with all of you. What are your thoughts on this?
I would share that it is okay to share material if it is specific to helping them fulfill a need. During the course of coaching, something has come up and they need a particular resource. So in that regard, it's appropriate to share that. If it's something to sell on my own business, like perhaps I'm a coach and I'm an author on the side, and I'm share with this person that my book be excellent for her, in my mind, that's not appropriate. It's almost a conflict of interest.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I agree with what Kate said. I also believe that if you're sharing your material with a colleague, like if it's a tool that works for you in that aspect and they would like to try it, I don't see where there's an issue if they wanted to use the material or the tool.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Stephanie?
So I just finished my master course. I'm relatively new to coaching. And one of the things that, you know, with Monique that she particularly stressed, because I did it a lot where I wasn't partnering, because I suggested, would you like, you know, and she said, well, how can you do that so that you invite the person instead of you sharing it with them? You know, you're inviting them to see if that's something they want to explore together. And she gave us a few phrases as examples, and I found those to be very helpful. But she was right. You know, I automatically, in those conversations, assumed I knew what that person needed or wanted. So I'm still learning how to do that. And then, you know, for sharing the materials with a colleague, I think it depends on the material, because I'm assuming some of the stuff is copyrighted and stuff like that. So you kind of have to be careful about what you paid for and not paid for. So, you know, there's some materials where you have to go to courses to get, you know, certified and those sorts of things. So
Yeah, so those are copyrighted materials we can't share.
right.
So back to the idea of if you do want to share materials with a client, how can you do it appropriately?
Well, like Stephanie just mentioned, and when I made my answer, I made the assumption that this question you're asking about sharing material, that the client has already agreed that, yes, they would like to, you know, after I've invited them and asked them if they would like that. But yeah, it would be appropriate if, depending on the material, to go ahead and, if it's appropriate to, and if it's possible to get purchase the right to that material if it is copyrighted. Just depends on the particular resource.
Mhm.
Some information cannot be shared if it is copyrighted. Yeah, I think just depends on the type of material.
Mhm. So let me give you a twist on this. Client talking about whatever challenge they have, and in discussing that, the coach is thinking about a book, and the coach recommends the book to the client. And the client reads the book and hates it. So now bring that into the coach sharing materials with the client. What's your reaction?
I think disclaimers are good. I mean, I think it's important for us to use disclaimers, because what may work for me, the material that I use may work for me, and I understand the material, doesn't mean that it would be received by a client or a colleague. You never know. So I like disclaimers. You know, I think that's important. I'm not sure, you know, but I like disclaimers.
So there's a couple of key pieces coming out of what I'm hearing. Number one, the idea of inviting the client. And then number two, the idea of, okay, is it copyright? Is it even something I have the option of sharing? Or is it something that they can go get for themselves because it's available online or whatever? So there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. One is asking them, back to your idea of the invitation, what resources do you have for information around that? What resources do you want for information around that? So we find that out first. The other thing I think about is if I recommend just one resource, it may or may not work. If we look at several resources and let them choose where they want to go, how does that impact it?
It gives them the option.
Mhm.
I do that quite often with most of my clients. I'm a financial coach,
Mhm.
and many of the clients are in well, lately it's been where they've had difficulty with paying rent. So part of our coaching is around that they need help and they need resources. And I have a long list of various resources, organizations that offer rental assistance. And so I give them the whole list after they say, yes, I'd like to have this. Because obviously they need help through discovery, through the coaching. So then they can choose which one to contact.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't say, well, just go to this one. Oh, my clients have said this one is really good. I actually give them a full list and then help empower them that way
Mhm.
by making choice.
Yeah, I know a lot of coaches that literally have it on their website because that's their niche, and they'll have that list of resources there that people can go to.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, I got another one for you. Well, let me check first. Is everybody feeling complete with this one?
Yeah.
So, one of the things on this topic, I haven't created my niche yet, but I always feel like if somebody were to ask about this topic, if I go broader, and they say I really want help in this area, and it's okay, but I don't know all of the different resources. Reaching out to another coach to see what resources they have. I'm wondering from that crossover, when is there any concern, or if there is any concern with just sharing those resources? I mean, to me, it's just like, okay, a list of books or a list of websites, a list of videos. I don't see anything ethically wrong with that.
Mhm. Yeah, as long as it's copyright and, for example,
Right.
giving them the link. So I think you
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head. I can't just hand you something or email you files because those are probably copyrighted. The idea of having a list of books or TED Talks. I know a lot of coaches like to use TED Talks and that kind of thing. Yeah, different ballgame, right? And
Mhm.
multiple ones. So it's not, oh, this is the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally makes sense. It's whether it's a printed list or a document that you share that lists all these resources on a website. Sometimes even just going online with the client and saying and doing a search together. I've actually
Yeah.
done that with clients. Yeah, hey,
Yeah.
what's out there? So, yeah,
Good idea.
yeah. Yep. Okay, so let me go to our next one. You're coaching a client, they have a sponsor, and the sponsor is asking the coach to provide information about the coaching. What information can be shared with who? And when can client information be shared? And if you want a couple of places in the code of ethics to reference, they're listed here for you. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I would only share specifically never any information, with the exception that I've gotten written consent from the client in writing, well, written consent, specifically for that organization or that name. I have a situation now with Denver Rescue Mission where they're sending us clients and they actually do get permission from the client and have it all signed appropriately. And then I don't anytime I don't offer information unless the case manager contacts me and I have that in writing.
Mhm.
And then it depends on the information that, well, it depends on how the consent form is written, describing what type of information can be shared.
Okay. Good example in that scenario. Awesome. Yolanda and Stephanie, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking about the consent. I'm thinking about consent from both ends. You know? And then I'm also thinking about how much information, you know,
Mhm.
because some sponsors may want a lot of detailed information and, you know, and then I don't really care about all getting into the details of, you know, what I did with a client, you know? So I think that the consents on both ends is very important, I believe.
Yeah, before we
Yeah.
even start, what
Mhm.
having
Right.
the clarity of what information can be shared with who.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Stephanie?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the coaching agreement and any sponsor agreement, clarifying that. And at the beginning, and then you guys said it just in different words. That's how. But you know, I'm imagining that you may have a company, and if you're doing some like performance coaching, they want more details. So I think that's really important for them to define that at the beginning as to what specific information they need. And then making sure the client is aware of that before the relationship begins so that they understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure if any of you have seen the white paper we give out on internal coaching programs, one of the examples in there is basically co-creating a report with the client. These are the goals they're working on. Here's the notes on how it's going. Here's the plan moving forward, that kind of thing. And in co-creating it, then the client can turn it in themselves to the sponsor. Alternatively, they give permission for that to be turned in. So there's the clarity. The client knows exactly what information is being disclosed. Now, let me give you a different scenario. And this is actually a real live scenario. So a coach worked inside the organization. They were an employee. They had a client and they were doing the coaching sessions and they were taking notes. And the client's manager came to the coach and said, I want you to tell me what you're talking about. And the coach said, well, I can't do that. It's confidential. So the manager went to the IT department and said, get the notes off that computer. And so the IT department got the notes off the computer. Confidentiality was violated. Where did the responsibility for that lie? With the coach.
Yes.
Because the manager had the right to go to the IT department. The IT department knew the manager had that level of authority. It was that the notes were put in a place that was accessible by others. So we talk about this awareness of the technology we're using. And if I'm going to email notes to a client, I better have a conversation with them about what email address we're using. I even have a client where when we do sessions, they use their cell phone. because company phone lines are randomly monitored.
Mhm.
So we have to be aware. We talk in the coaching world about making sure you don't have Alexa on your phone,
Yeah,
because if you do, it's not confidential.
right.
You know, Alexa, Siri, that kind of thing. So it's, those things got to be shut off
Yeah,
in a coaching session. The Code of Ethics talks about the exception to confidentiality being a threat of harm or an unreported crime. Basically is my way of summing it up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Um,
that's certainly true. Yeah.
Yeah. So important to
Mhm.
make sure, because if we fail to protect the confidentiality, then that whole coaching relationship and engagement is at risk.
Right.
Unsure if any of you remember it from class. One of the examples we often use is, imagine being hired by an organization to coach a high potential. And you start working with the client. The client says, look, they don't know this, but I have no intention of staying with this company. I'm out of here within 6 months. And the coach knows the company hired them to coach this person because they want to bring them up as a leader inside the organization. Is that information the coach can or should share?
No.
Oh,
Nope.
nope.
And it's, what's to me really interesting about it is we think, oh, well, they're paying me all this money and this person's leaving. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, think about this for a second. If the coach violates confidentiality and tells the company, the client doesn't even have the option of changing their mind. Game
Right.
over. They might have changed their mind. Also, during the time they are there, is it going to impact how hard they work? Of course, they want to leave on a good note. And when they do leave on a good note, they can come back, they can refer other people, they can become a customer, they can become a vendor. It's protecting their relationship as well. Thoughts on that?
My thought is the coach has first and foremost the responsibility to the client.
Mhm.
Yes, they're getting paid by the
Sponsor.
sponsor, the company, but
Yeah.
we have to go by and want to go by the code of ethics. Our
Mhm.
first responsibility, no matter what, is the client.
It's the client. Yeah.
No, confidentiality is owed to the client.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's right in there. Talks about it. All right. So just learning and insights out of those conversations, those different case studies.
Um, I shake my head. I'm not surprised, but with the level of technology, there is this example that you gave about the manager going to the IT department. You know, I work at home. I have my own computer. I'm remote. So everything's fine. But if I were ever to be in an environment using a company's computer, I would definitely do notes in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, a flash drive or something no one has access to it. It's just a good reminder. It's also a good reminder about how technology continues to advance. And I didn't know about Lexa not being confidential, but it makes sense.
Mhm.
So I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, or even emails, if it's a company.
Oh, yes,
drive.
yes, emails. Absolutely.
Yeah, with the remote ones.
Yeah.
Right. Emails and even phone calls, depending, like you said, the work phone versus the personal cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your iPads too. Some people use their iPads a lot, but iPads are not they're not safe as well too.
Oh, good
As
to know.
far as Yeah, they did a whole training at the college where I work, and I mean, this guy who was doing the training, he was just tapping into everybody's information, and we had our devices right there. It was mind blowing to me.
Real, I didn't know that.
Tapped into it. He just give me a name. He was able to tap in, and he works for the government. And I was blown away. So like for me, I really try to like separate everything. And like you, I work from home sometimes too, because we can telecommute. But as far as with coaching and my coaching material, I have it separated big time. I mean, like I really, because after seeing that presentation, I was just blown away how easy this guy was able to tap into our system.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that about iPads.
Oh yeah, be careful about the iPad. So it's like you really have to like I want an old fashioned typewriter so I can just type myself and just put it in the file cabinet and keep it locked. But it's yeah, it's interesting.
Mm.
Be careful of the iPad.
Wow.
Because I use mine a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back and forth on what type of technology to use. And I've been spending some time thinking about this because, there's Google Meets and there's Zoom. And then, how do you send your files to people and this and that? And, all these things are supposedly secure, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the one that I've been leaning towards is called Signal. And it's an app, but it's like the most secure app that I can find for, like it's like WhatsApp, but it's secure, you
Oh,
know?
Is it a video conference?
Yeah, it's video conferencing and it's messaging and stuff like that. But not a whole lot of people use it because people are used to using like some of these Zoom and stuff like that. I think it's a 403B company where it's all nonprofit, so they're not making any money off of it. But I do keep going back. Well, if you send it to their email and they're using it with Gmail, is it really even if it's free? Is that considered?
Yeah. Oh, and if you look at like Google Docs and the privacy policy and some of the others, they have permission to access your stuff.
Yeah.
I never ever use anything on the cloud for that reason.
Yeah.
For my personal stuff as well as,
Yeah.
I mean, I would never even do anything like that with a client, with the cloud stuff or Google Docs.
Yeah. It's definitely challenging. And to your point, Stephanie, something that's clients
Yeah.
can use. Zoom does have a lot in there, and I know a lot of coaches use that. Is there anything that's totally perfect? Probably not.
Right.
So yeah, awesome. Awesome. Okay, I actually have a couple more for you. So let's say you do an agreement with a client, 6 sessions or whatever you do, and they pay up front for those 6 sessions. And then the client wants to end early. How does the coach appropriately manage accountability? And how should they handle any fees that were paid? What do y'all think?
Well, my first thought is I certainly would honor the request that the client has, but I would coach around and just check in what the reasons are for ending the relationship early. And of course, it depends. I mean, I may already know, maybe the client has already met her needs. The coaching has led to her fulfillment of what brought her initially. So I guess it really depends on the scenario. If she feels like, and I feel like it's complete, and yes, the goals have been met, the client is happy, then I certainly would always invite them to come back if they ever needed to. As far as, so I think it really depends on the context on how to answer that question. As far as how to handle the fees that were paid, I suppose that would depend on how was our initial coaching agreement set up and how was it detailed. If it's a full package, no matter, well, with X number of sessions, it could be my prerogative to give her a refund on a prorated basis. I would tend to do that. You know, I think it just depends on how the agreement is written up and how is the client. Another situation that's just dawned on me is why, you know, there could be so many reasons for ending the relationship early. Perhaps there's some reason that the client is unhappy. And certainly that needs to be explored as well. Maybe I am not qualified to go down a certain path. Maybe it turns out the coach, the client really would benefit from psychotherapy. And of course, I would speak up and explain, you know, that's beyond the scope of coaching and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios as to why the coaching relationship would end early.
Mhm.
That's a long answer.
It's all good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on the situation. And I had a client where it actually was a teenager. And so they wanted to split the time because to keep their attention. So I did it in 15-minute increments. And that really worked well. But the last 15-minute one, I decided, hey, you can use it as if you needed to, if you had an emergency, because it was his job that interfered with what we were doing. And he was from out of town too, with a different time frame. So we couldn't get that last one in, but he had all the tools from the earlier sessions. So, and he was doing the work, but got a good job. And so he wanted, he wanted that motorcycle. So hey, and he used it. And I also put like a time frame of when you can use that last 15. So I did have a cutoff time, and but he never used it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That's a fun one. Good example. What are you thinking, Stephanie?
I'm thinking that it would be nice to welcome the clients to donate their sessions to someone who can't afford them
That's
if
nice.
they're unused, for inclusion of those that are in a different economic group.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, what if the client's reason for ending early is, I didn't know this was going to be so hard and so much work? Then what do you do?
I would do my best to coach around, again, gauging the client's mood, and certainly depending on how many sessions we've had, how well do I know the client? Certainly building rapport at the beginning. I would just coach around, what it is about this that's difficult, and just try to explore and encourage them and to invite them to realize the situation they've been in has, I'll use an example I'm making up. The situation you've been in, well, finances is a great example. You've had certain beliefs around finances for much of your adult life. Its very nature is just to, it takes little steps to get to where you want. And I would just kind of coach around, would they be willing to work with it or not? Maybe the time is not right. There could be shame underneath, and they don't want to even deal with money and how they got in so much debt. It just depends again on the circumstances, but I would do my best to just bring to their awareness through my questions, what is it about it that's so difficult?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, be quite mindful of not crossing the line of psychotherapy. I just want to bring into their awareness, yeah, this is hard, but then encourage them, yeah, it takes time. But at the same time, yeah, it can be, depending on the coach, the client, it could be a delicate situation. We might be touching on nerves. I deal with this a lot with the financial clients I have. There's so many beliefs around it, and I'm not a good person. Look at all the mess up I did. I'm not worthy. I can't fix it. It's way overwhelming. But I encourage them, just little steps takes them far.
Yeah. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, Yolanda.
I would explore what the client could actually do and what they would want to do. If it's too heavy, I would kind of read if it's too heavy, and if they express that it's too much for them, yeah, I would touch on it a little bit, but I would go into what can you do and what will help you
Yeah.
with this coaching session. Because again, it's about them. And if it's too heavy, then how do we make it light? How do we make it, useful for you? I'm channeling my Kathy.
You're so awesome. What was coming to mind is, how at the beginning of the year, everybody goes and joins the gym
Yeah.
and they pay a year-long membership. And then by February, March, gym's empty again.
Yep.
It's okay. I want this. I want to exercise and be healthy and all these other kind of things, but that takes work.
Yeah.
That
What do you think, Stephanie?
I'm thinking stress. When you say that, I'm thinking that the person may have a lot going on in their lives, and just, taking a break and not having goals might be a better way of, or just might be something to reflect on. Meaning the goals might be just to reduce your stress before you take any more on. If somebody is really struggling with the amount of work, okay, well, what are you doing right now that you can do differently to make time for the work? How important is this to you compared to some of the other things you have on? And I'm just thinking of my own personal life.
Yeah.
I have the children and the dogs and the house and the husband and the this and the that, and I'm running around and I'm like, okay, how important is it compared to all the other things, and prioritizing it and working through those priorities? And maybe the things that they said they want to do just aren't as important, and you work on other things instead.
Yeah.
So
Reevaluate priorities and potentially change the scope of what you're working on.
That reminds me also of how important it is to know what the client's values are, that the client knows what are their values, and it goes right in line with priorities. And yes, it's so easy to get overwhelmed with so much of many responsibilities. And again, depending on the situation, depending on the context, I might use motivational interviewing technique called discrepancy, pointing out a discrepancy. But I'd be very careful with that because it just depends on the context of what the client is working on. And like Stephanie, you said so well, how much stress is there in the other areas? So.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. All right, I got another one for you. You have a coach who's LGBTQAI, hope I got it all, and the client is very religious. What disclosure from the coach is appropriate? How should the coach handle the potential conflict? What are your thoughts here?
Well, I believe that it's not appropriate to disclose anything by the coach. The coach being the LGBTQAI should have absolutely nothing to do with the coaching relationship. If this coach is really, truly an excellent coach, the coach will be in a place of non-judgment. And I don't know, certainly I don't know how the client will react. If the client brought something up, then I think it would be appropriate, for the coach to be authentic and share. If the client brought up something very specific regarding the coach's lifestyle, it certainly depends on what is said and what the communication is. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a very good one. This is a really good one. I think the coach should just stick to coaching, really, regardless of, what the client is saying,
Mhm.
um, if I was the coach in this situation, I'd probably just stick to coaching, stick to the code of ethics, and go there. Now, if it leads to another direction to where the coach can't handle what the religious client is saying, then I don't know. I think you have to look at some possibilities of referring to another coach.
Yep.
Okay. What are you thinking, Stephanie?
That's a good one.
Well, I think that when you go in the coaching relationship, you don't have to agree with what the person's saying. However, they're going to do their own thing. You're not there to judge. I think that was said earlier. But at the same time, I think that the coach may have an internal conflict through that conversation
Mhm.
that may be harmful for them to proceed for an enduring period of time. So if it's no religion comes up, it's like, no big deal. You just coaching, you're talking about financial coaching. Who cares whether that person's religious? You're just talking about money. I think the issue is when they start dealing with their own internal conflicts of those areas, that might be a challenge. And then how important is it to the coach that the two have conflicting opinions? Because you may not bother the coach at all. You just accept that there's nothing you can do about it, and you but you also may have some growth in understanding the other person's perspective through the coaching experience. So it could kind of go both ways,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a coach whose client had a lot of bias, and the coach was part of the group that the bias was against. And the client was saying things and literally having the conversation with the coach. And they're like, I don't know if I can handle this.
Mm.
And it's okay. So pros and cons of hanging in there. What is it? What are the pros of hanging in there? What are the cons? What does it take from you? What's the opportunity?
Yeah.
Our code of ethics talks about being aware of our clients' impact on society as well as our own. And what's the opportunity for opening awareness around that bias in the client? What's your reaction to that question?
My sense is it's not my place as a coach to say anything or try to convince the client of anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my role. Now, if it happens to be that the client came very specifically because she or he wants to deal with the issue of prejudice against gay people. I really want to be coached around people who are really gay, and I don't want to, or whatever. I don't know, it would be appropriate for the gay, I'm just using this example. If the gay coach, yeah, that would be tough. And so really, what is within ourselves? The bottom line is, can we effectively coach? Can we still coach in a very effective, proper way, given this situation? And the coach needs to be, whether it's this situation or any situation, truly honest with themselves. Is this appropriate for me to continue coaching this client? You know, like Yolanda mentioned as well, it may be you need to refer them. And I don't feel it's my place at all to try to convince the client of anything.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Unless it's to go to another coach.
Yeah, not to convince, the idea of creating awareness
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's debrief those learning points and insights around those last couple of case studies.
I enjoyed this. I really did enjoy the scenarios. It was really, really good scenarios. Yeah, I learned a lot here, and it validates a lot of what I am doing, kind of aligns with, I try to stick to the code of ethics. I mean, it's like policies and procedures. It's like you better refer to it.
Yeah.
In doing this, because it's going to be a lot of different scenarios that we face. And I think the pandemic has brought on so many things right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I believe
Totally.
coaches are going to be really, really busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we never know what kind of unique situation a client may bring to us, and to always just be aware. We want to always be aware anyway, but there can be so many unique, very unique situations. Yeah. Well.
So the question that you asked, the situation resonated with me was, and I'm still going to think about this deeper a little bit more, is to, when someone brings something to you that they want to work through that creates an emotional response from the coach.
Mhm.
And how do you decide when it's not the best fit? And how do you approach that? I think I
Yeah.
need to think about that a little bit more. Because if the emotions are draining you through coaching the person through whatever disagreement you may have with that person that you're helping them work through, that sounds unhealthy to me. So
Has that potential, yeah.
yeah, and at what point, I mean, I think it's good, like a good experience to coach someone with it because it shows you another perspective of someone. So I think it's kind of good. That sometimes it seems emotionally distressing, and I'm not quite sure where that fits in. And I guess it's a personal choice, but I'm kind of curious. This is the first session I've gone to for these case studies, and I think you have them like every couple months, right?
We do a webinar every month, and
Okay.
they're all different topics. What
Okay.
does happen on an ongoing basis, ICF has what's called the Ethics Community of Practice.
Okay.
I'm actually a co-leader there, so I'm all into it. I like to geek out on ethics. We have an online discussion in Basecamp for the Ethics Community of Practice, so we have a lot of conversations there. In addition to that, there's regular conversations and we talk ethics and that kind of thing. So a lot of resources in addition to the free webinars we do at the Center for Coaching Certification. There's resources through ICF as well. So, and if you did your master coach class, then you have enough coach training hours to be able to join ICF.
Yeah.
There's, I want to say 10 or 12 communities of practice.
Okay.
I personally join all of them. And I can't make the webinars all the time. I attend the ones that I can, and you have access to them as well via recording. And then what they'll do is have little questions you answer. And so you can get credit for doing it that way.
Okay.
I will say in the ethics community of practice, we do a lot where it's a breakout room conversation, because there's usually a couple hundred people at those.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then when you have these once a month, you have different questions each time?
Yeah, so the ones through the Center for Coaching Certification, we have guest presenters.
Okay.
We have different topics, that kind of thing. Like we recently had one on ADHD parent coaching.
Okay.
So there's just a slew of different topics.
Okay.
But how often do you do this one?
This particular one,
Case studies.
it was just the topic I chose for
Yeah.
this month.
Yeah.
A good one.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if you're enjoying it, that tells me something. So maybe I'll have to work on doing more of it. More
Yeah.
different case studies or scenarios. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I do have a couple other things to share with you. When you think about the code, even the code of ethics, and this came up in one of the conversations earlier, it can be so situational. There are gray areas. We want to be open to reflecting, open to exploration, and think about everyone that's affected. In addition to the code of ethics, ICF has the ethics interpretive statements. So the ethics interpretive statements take each point from the code and dig into it further. That particular document is living dynamic. It gets updated and that kind of thing. So it's just a great place you can go and review and get more information and more insight on these pieces. I'll give you a couple of resources here with this. First off, for yourself, back to how do you decide? You were asking that question. Check with yourself, check with your client. Do you remember the ethics decision tree from the CPC class? Yeah. Can I effectively coach this person? Okay. Yes or no. And then based on that answer, you have the next question. So just determine if you can effectively continue. Could it be perceived as a conflict? So if I say, yeah, I can continue, Is it possible they see this as a conflict? In a case like that, disclose the conflict and let them decide whether or not to continue. If I say, no, I can't coach this person, what's the impact of me disclosing the conflict? And that determines whether or not I simply say it was a personal conflict or I actually disclosed the conflict. Resources we have, the ethics community of practice. So if you've done the professional coach and the master coach, you can join ICF, and that's one of the benefits. Obviously, the code of ethics and the ethics interpretive statements. They also have a hotline where you can call and ask questions and say, okay, this is going on, what do I do? The discussion group we have on Basecamp is similar to that as well, where if somebody has something come up, they can pose the question in Basecamp, and we've got hundreds of people that are members of that, and will share their thoughts and input when you ask a question. So really, yeah.
If I may briefly interrupt, I just wonder if I am not a member of the ICF.
Mhm.
I probably could not contact them to ask them a question, being that I'm not a member. Am I right?
I don't know. I don't know how much they'll offer with that. It's in the coaching world, it's really a good idea to be there, to be a member of ICF. That's, as a self-regulating profession, that's really kind of our minimum standard is
Yeah.
membership in ICF. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Good. All right. Well, I am so delighted to have had the conversation with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, happy to hang if you have additional questions or other things you want to touch on.
I don't have anything, but thank you very much. And it's been nice to be
Thank
with all
you.
of you as well.
Yeah, good conversation.
This
Yes.
was great, Kathy. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
So it sounds like everybody's complete.
Yeah.
Okay, I will end our recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.